Trump deserves credit, I have to say, for brokering this ceasefire in Gaza, but I'm slightly skeptical since Biden also negotiated a ceasefire in Gaza 9 months ago. Remember that? No? Well, neither does Biden.
That hilarious TV show, Saturday Night Live. I remember Biden had a peace deal. What did he say? How long ago? 9 months ago? 9 months ago. Isn't that fascinating? That'd be in January. So he cobbled together a peace deal, knowing he was leaving on January 20th, and got headlines out of it, and they're still pandering to him on NBC's Saturday Night Live. It's good to be a Democrat, isn't it? There was it was a non-existent Biden peace deal. There was no peace deal. There was no Biden peace deal. But if you watch Saturday Night Live for your news, and a lot of dumb people do, isn't that amazing? Well, a very happy Monday to you, and welcome back once again. We remain at 888-630-9625. The President of the United States was in Israel earlier today, and then on to Egypt, which is another country altogether just to the south of Israel there. They've got, the Egyptians built a giant wall between the south end of Gaza and themselves because they didn't want any of those savages coming into Egypt. They've seen quite enough of that. So they built a wall. But I thought walls don't work. Only in Democrats' brains do walls not work. They've worked everywhere throughout all of human history forever, but never mind that. Extraordinary stuff. I want to get into audio because the president spoke to the President of the United States. President Donald John Trump spoke to the Knesset. That is the name of the Israeli parliament, of their legislature. And the president flew in on Air Force One. He flew overnight, probably stayed up all night, went in, and I think he had a teleprompter. But you wouldn't know it because he riffs all over the place. And he called for all kinds of fun things. He was doing shtick in the middle of addressing the Knesset. He's getting a lot of laughs and, thanking people. He asked the parliament, the president, to pardon the prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been accused of wrongdoing by his Democrat, his left wing in the Israeli government, the equivalent of Democrats in Israel. Extraordinary stuff. But I want to jump in because there's so much of it. And Benjamin Netanyahu spoke before President Trump spoke to the Israeli parliament, the Israeli legislature, the Knesset, today in Jerusalem. And it was quite a moment for President Trump, and I've got to say. And his daughter Ivanka was there, and her husband, who's been very much in the middle of all of the negotiations, very much in the middle of the negotiations, making these things happen. And Jared Kushner was there. He got a round of applause from the Knesset. But let me get into the audio because there's a lot to talk about here, and I want to start sharing it with you. And we continue to be at 888-630-9625. Let's go to soundbite number one. We keep that. That's the first one. Let's go to Benjamin Netanyahu. He's the prime minister of Israel, who will, kick butt for civilization because he's pro-civilization. The Democrat Party, there are about 1 million of them naked on bicycles in Portland, Oregon, laying down in traffic in the rain because of the rampant mental illness that is so pervasive in the Democrat Party. But let's set that aside for the moment. Here's Benjamin Netanyahu addressing his own parliament, his own Knesset, early this morning, our time, Eastern time. President Trump sitting next to him and listening to the prime minister.
Our great friend, the President of the United States, President Donald J. Trump.
Now, the applause, the applause for Trump was seemingly never-ending. It went on for minutes and minutes, and pretty much every time his name came up, and he was sitting there being modest, and he was demurring. Very, very nice. Netanyahu, again, part of it, the first part of it, was in Hebrew and through a translator. he then he said, well, there are a lot of English speakers out there. Let me start speaking English. Benjamin Netanyahu.
How long we've waited for this moment, and we have committed to return everyone. And I want to thank you personally and on behalf of the whole nation. Thank you, Mr. President, President Trump. Thank you, Mr. President.
Now, the left-wing radicals at the Panhandler Broadcasting System, PBS, their headline just minutes ago is Hamas frees living hostages. Israel releases prisoners. Sure, as Trump visits Middle East. Now, the Israelis are releasing convicted terrorists and criminals who arranged for and created suicide attacks, suicide bombings, terror attacks with rifles, hostage-taking, massive crimes, and they were captured by the police, put on trial with a jury, sentenced in a court of law to prison terms for their many crimes, and they want 2,000 of those terrorists back in exchange for 20 living hostages who they've been torturing for 2 years now. And in fact, the BBC called it a hostage exchange, as though Israel was holding hostages when they're not. They arrested, tried, and convicted terrorists and criminals and put them in prisons, didn't throw them in holes in the ground, paid for with international dollars, by the way, where they held them as hostages. They treated them as prisoners. They got culturally sensitive meals, and they're not subjected to everything that the terrorists subjected the hostages to. 738 days, and all living Israeli hostages were released from Hamas captivity in Gaza, thanks entirely to President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, who also represents civilization, and the Democratic Party does not. Then Netanyahu said, I think I should start speaking English for my English-speaking friends, and the President of the United States is here. Even though his daughter converted to Judaism, he doesn't speak Hebrew. So we'll go ahead and speak English.
I've said time and again, Donald Trump is the greatest friend that the state of Israel has ever had in the White House.
The Israeli parliament, this is not a public circumstance. This is the Israeli parliament. Get that rhythm going. It's a lot better than the rhythm of
No American president has ever done more for Israel. And as I said in Washington, it ain't even close.
It ain't even close. So 20 living hostages were released. The savages get terrorists and convicted murderers back. And then we get the Times of Israel just minutes ago. Hamas names 4 hostages whose bodies, I tell you, they murdered them long ago, will be handed over today. And they named the 4 hostages. Also, ABC fake news a few hours ago. 2 hostages previously believed to be held alive, not on list published by Hamas. So there are 2. Oh, well, these 2 are alive on the most recent list. They're like, oh, well, we've murdered them since then, so you won't be getting them back not alive. 2 hostages previously believed to have been held alive, not on list published by Hamas. And they've got the names of the people that were supposed to be released alive. And now the savages said, well, they're dead. We don't want them to be able to tell what we did with them, what happened to them. So 2 hostages whose fate in Gaza remained unknown were not included on the list published by Hamas of the 20 living hostages expected to be released during Monday's exchange of hostages held by Hamas and prisoners held by Israel, ABC fake news says. Neither Hamas nor Israel released statements saying the 2 were deceased. In addition to some 1,200 Israelis killed on October 7th, 2023, Hamas kidnapped 251 men and women during the terror attack. The majority were later released in hostage exchanges in the 2 years since then. Now, of the 48 hostages who were still in Gaza at the time of the new ceasefire deal, thanks to President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, 26 were confirmed dead by Israeli officials. 20 others were believed to be alive at the time, with 2 people's fates unknown. And so this is what you get with savages and terrorists and with the news media, where they say, oh, it's a hostage exchange, making a moral equivalency between, drawing a moral equivalency between people that are arrested for crimes, put on trial by juries, found guilty, and then, of course, put in prison. That's one set of circumstances. And the BBC says, oh, those are hostages being held by Israel. No, those are convicted terrorists and convicted criminals, convicted in a judicial system, not kidnapped from a concert and thrown into a pit in the ground where they're tortured and raped until they die, which is what these savages do. All right, let's get back to Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the Knesset this morning.
Mr. President, you are committed to this peace. I am committed to this peace. And together, Mr. President, we will achieve this peace.
I got to say, the Knesset was very, very enthusiastically and warmly receiving the President of the United States. Had it been Joe Biden, had it been Kamala Harris, well, he wouldn't be there. This is, by the way, the first president of the United States, I believe, to ever address the Israeli legislature, the Knesset, the first president ever invited to address the Israeli prime ministers have addressed a joint session of Congress in the past, including Netanyahu. But an American president has never addressed the Israeli Knesset until today, when Donald Trump did that. And as Benjamin Netanyahu made clear, President Trump is the best ally in the White House that Israel has ever had. And Joe Biden was most definitely not, regardless of what Saturday Night Live says, just part of the Democrat Party's propaganda apparatus. Then the opposition leader spoke. We'll leave him out of it. And then President Trump was introduced addressing, for the first time in history, the American president addressing the Knesset.
And after so many years of unceasing war and endless danger, today the skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still, and the sun rises on a holy land that is finally at peace, a land and a region that will live, God willing, in peace for all eternity.
Which is a long time in the Arab world and for all eternity. I fully expect the terrorists to come back as the terrorists that they are, and Hamas is supposed to disarm and disband, and I don't believe that they will, because they're among the most corrupt people in the history of the world anywhere. Aren't they? Aren't they amazing? Yes, they are. Wah, wah, wah. The President of the United States aboard Air Force One heading down to Sharm el-Sheikh on the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula. I mentioned the other day that I was in Egypt years ago in my previous life, and in Cairo, and got there on a big blue and white Air Force plane flying with a cabinet secretary, a defense secretary. And we were scheduled to head down to Sharm el-Sheikh, the resort on the southern Sinai, with the U.S. Defense Secretary. And I believe that we had made it to the airport and were getting on the plane when we were told, oh, by the way, Sharm el-Sheikh is no longer our destination because of a serious terrorist threat that we have detected against the Secretary of Defense visiting, and the plane and the group being targeted. So we called off that trip to Sharm el-Sheikh, the exclusive and expensive resort, Sharm el-Sheikh. But President Trump arriving there today at Sharm el-Sheikh because he's signing a deal, and that Egypt and other Arab nations will be there. And I've got to say, this is a security nightmare. There is no doubt about that. Yes, sir. You know that the big wireless companies have been pulling one over on all of us, and it's time to make the switch to consumer cellular. I made the switch. I'm getting the same fast, reliable, nationwide, big wireless coverage, same towers, same transmitters, same networks, but without the big wireless cost every month. And it's not just about saving money every month, although that's real good. It's also about not being used and abused by the big wireless companies that use and abuse you. Do you have any idea how much data you use every month? You know, most people over the age of 50 have no idea how much data they use. I have no idea how much I use, but likely to use less than 8 gigs of data in a month. But the big wireless companies, they shove everybody into an unlimited plan because they milk you for all the cash they can milk you for. They need you to cover the cost of younger people using 10 times as much data as you use all day, all night. So if you're not using all that data, then you are the one being used. When you've had enough of that, make the switch to consumer cellular. Set me up with a service and a phone. It's really easy to make the switch, too. You call, you talk to an actual human being, a real person. Based right here in the United States, not on a space platform, not a robot. Real human beings that are actually helpful. It'll only take you about 20 minutes to make the switch, so give them a call today and make the change. You'll be glad you did. Call them at 1-800-760-0702. That's 800-760-0702. Yes, sir. My microphone just fell off the arm here, so I've got to go fix the... It's going to take a minute. I'm going to have to reattach the microphone to the arm here. Falls off every now and then. I might violate the union regs putting it back on, but I'm going to do it anyway. We're at 888-630-9625. Now, don't I feel silly? Looks like I believed the news media that I heard over the weekend. President Trump is not the first American president at all to address the Israeli Knesset. Don't be silly. In fact, an Air Force colonel friend of mine texted me moments ago, and we got a call from a nice lady that talked to Jeff and said, Chris is a big dope. He's believing what he saw in the media. I'm not quoting her. I'm just freelancing. Jimmy Carter, because he had his silly peace deal that didn't last very long with Anwar Sadat, who was then gunned down by assassins during a public event, and machine guns they gunned him down. But Jimmy Carter with his peace deal in the Middle East. How many peace deals do you have in the Middle East? And then Bill Clinton had his peace deal in the Middle East. Actually, I was at the Clinton White House the day that the Middle East peace deal was signed. I spent a little time with Jimmy Carter that day. He was at the Clinton White House for that Clinton peace deal in the Middle East. It went real well, too. And George W. Bush, also addressed the Knesset. So I could hardly have been more wrong. How many more presidents could have possibly addressed the Knesset? And President Trump is number 4. Hopefully his peace deal will be more sustaining, more long-lasting than the others. Oh, yes, I want to mention this. I was going back and forth with our great friend Kevin Tober yesterday. I am broadcasting right now, as I normally do, from my home studio. That's not at home. It's at the radio station. But my home studio, WMAL in Washington, D.C., the mothership of our humble radio broadcast on 200 million radio stations now. 200 million radio stations throughout the galaxy. But in the United States, about 200, and then millions more around the galaxy. Isn't that amazing? And let me say that yesterday, October 12th, was the 100-year anniversary of WMAL going on the air, broadcasting from Washington, D.C. October 12th of 1925, 100 years ago yesterday. WMAL signed on for the very first time, and 100 years later, I've got to say, I think we have one of the great talk radio stations you're going to find anywhere in the country, and this is the only place you find them is in this great country. And the Democrats, they've tried to put an end to talk radio because they're authoritarian, as Barack Obama would say, because they're arrogant and corrupt and all of that. But WMAL turns 100, and that's kind of a big deal, sort of fun. And it also reminds me that my family, starting with my mother's father, my grandfather, Patrick Henry Barnes, who was a doughboy in World War I fighting in France. And I mentioned sometimes I still have his iron skillet. In fact, we cooked yesterday in my grandfather's iron skillet a duck breast. We had great stuff, scrambled eggs and duck breast. No, excuse me, they were over easy eggs and duck breast yesterday and hash browns for breakfast in my grandfather's skillet. But I digress. My grandfather, Patrick Henry Barnes, who I lived with when I was a kid, my 3 older brothers and I and my mother lived with him after our father died. And but my grandfather, he was on the air when I was a kid. He was on television by then. My mother was on television when I was a kid. My mother then remarried when I was 5 years old, after our father died when I was 5 months old. And but my mother's father on the radio starting in 1924 with his own full-time show. I think it was on the radio sometime starting in 1922. But my family's been on the air nonstop for more than 100 years now. Now, again, my mother remarried when I was 5 years old, a guy named Bill Plant, who married in St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. That was my first wedding. My first wedding was my mother's wedding. Yeah, it's kind of sounds different, doesn't it? And so my stepfather, CBS News, my mother was on television when I was a kid, WISN in Milwaukee. Her father, Pat Barnes, was on the air at WISN Milwaukee, the CBS station then. Now it's an ABC station. And then my mother married a second time, a CBS News reporter who was on the air at CBS for 52 years. My older brother, Daniel, on the air for 35 years in San Diego, California, as a news reporter there. Me on the air from CNN and then from the Pentagon, and then here on the radio, and then on Newsmax as well. But in any case, the radio station WMAL, 100 years on the air as of yesterday. These are the studios that I'm coming from, although these are not 100-year-old studios. These are newer studios. And although the microphone still falls off the thing every now and then. And so 100 years for WMAL. Happy century mark for WMAL. Isn't that amazing? And my grandfather, who it turns out was a great conservative, a great political and social conservative and media figure going way back. He was on our side, and he was anti-communist and pro-America, and a great American, great stuff, great stuff. And my mother on the air from the time in New York City from the New Amsterdam Theater, just off of Times Square. My mother was doing national radio broadcasts from the time she was 7 years old and 9 years old with her father, who was doing national radio broadcasts from New York, going way back, 1920s, 1930s. He was on WGN in Chicago for a period of time, did a lot of national radio broadcasts year after year. Great stuff. Then he went into television when television came along. You know, the 1920s, there was only radio. So there was. In fact, I have 2 cool trophies at home that were awarded to my grandfather, Pat Barnes, from the Radio Digest people. And I believe it's 1926. He was the runner-up for world's most popular announcer. There was only one kind of announcer. There weren't TV and, just you were a radio announcer. That's it. 1927, I have the trophy at home. The world's most popular announcer, my grandfather. And that's 98 years ago now. Pretty great stuff. They were around the house when I was a kid, and I ended up in custody and possession of those trophies. And it's kind of great to be on a radio station, WML, that is now 100 years old. And only my family, I think, has been on the air for longer than that. I don't think there is another family in the United States that can say, and I'd be happy to learn if there was one, that can say that they've been on the air nonstop for longer than my family. I just don't think that'd be a really heavy lift to be on the air. Womp. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And it was a Monday, October 12th of 1925 was a Monday, and Washington was very excited. Hey, we got a radio station. Washington, D.C. got a radio station. October 12th of 1925. And here we are now, October 13th of 2025, 100 years and 1 day later. And that's, that makes him one of the oldest, earliest continuously operating radio stations in the country and therefore the world, naturally. And, I loved my grandfather very much, lived with my grandfather, Pat Barnes, when we were kids. And again, we have his iron skillet, which I'm thrilled to have. And I just got it a few years ago. And it's when we were little kids, our grandfather used to make us in the kitchen. He'd bring out his iron skillet, put the bacon in there, and then move the bacon to the side and then crack eggs in there. While he told us about how in France in World War I, they would go up to farmhouses and the farm ladies would give them eggs and give them a little ham or something. And they'd use their army helmets, their doughboy helmets, to put them over a flame. They'd make a little fire. And they use their helmets to make the bacon, the ham, and then drop the eggs in, crack the eggs in. And so my brothers and I always called them army helmet eggs when he made the eggs in the skillet with the bacon, because he said, this is how we did them in France in the farm fields. And the French farm women would give us eggs, and we'd make them in our helmets over a flame. And now I have that iron skillet. And whenever I make eggs in there, or my best girl makes eggs in there, I call them army helmet eggs because they're his iron skillet. And, and the army helmet eggs story stuck with us. And as kids, we all assumed that we would grow up and go to war, right? Because, here's our grandfather and his World War I stuff around the house. And then our father, who died when I was 5 months old of a heart attack at the age of 38. And he was a World War II veteran and a Navy fighter pilot. And we always assumed, well, when you grow up, you go to France and you kill Germans and then you come home because the Germans are everywhere. So what my grandfather did, what my father did. Then my stepfather, he was a news reporter guy. But he deployed to Vietnam 4 times, covering the Vietnam War for CBS News, Walter Cronkite and all that. And he also was dispatched to Israel for war after war in Israel. And so growing up as a kid, war was everywhere. It wasn't just the Vietnam War on the TV in the living room. There was a lot more. And I just assumed that I'd reach a certain age and then I'd be in the military and then I'd go to war and then I'd come home. Crazy. But in any case, I digress all over the place. WMAL, happy birthday, happy 100th birthday to WMAL. How great is that? Nonstop on the air in Washington, D.C. for 100 years and 1 day. Not always a conservative talk radio station, but it is one of the great, not because of me, but it's one of the great conservative talk radio stations in the country. It genuinely is. Yes, sir. So we have that. We have that going. And I wanted to take a little time to talk about the 100th anniversary of WMAL today. Coming from the WMAL studios, as I've always done for 20 years. And great times. And then, pay homage and honor to my grandfather, Purple Heart recipient, France, World War I, and my father, World War II. He was not a radio broadcaster, however, but, Silver Star, Air Medal, good things, good stuff. And with all that said, God bless America and God save us all. And thank God for conservative talk radio, because otherwise the left would just, as Barack Obama warned us, would just crush free speech and free media everywhere, as Barack Obama was caterwauling about over the weekend very, very insincerely, as he's talking about rising authoritarianism. He's the most, perhaps, authoritarian president we've ever had in the history of the country. Not on our side, Barack Obama.
Like many of you, I've become increasingly concerned about the rising wave of authoritarianism sweeping the globe. We're seeing politicians target civil society, undermine freedom of the press, weaponize the justice system.
Yeah. Isn't that ironic? Yeah, you're the guys that were on the phone with Facebook and with Twitter killing stories. You're the guys that use the IRS to target Tea Party groups and patriot groups to sideline them on the lead up to your re-election. You guys are the ones that use the FBI and the Justice Department and the intelligence community to target your political enemies. You're the guys that tried to entrap, we just learned recently, Tom Homan during the fourth year of the Biden administration. The FBI tried to set him up, showed up with a bag full of cash, 50 grand in cash, tried to ensnare Tom Homan. He had a consulting firm at the time. How did the FBI misrepresent themselves? Because surely they didn't say, hey, Tom Homan, we're with the FBI. Here's a bag of $50,000 in cash. So they set him up. They ensnared him. They used the FBI and the Justice Department to try to ambush and trap and jail their political enemies like the authoritarian SOBs that they are. They're the left. They're not on the side of civilization. Just saying. All right, but I've digressed all over the place, haven't I? And with that said, let's go to the telephone. Well, there's a lot more audio I still want to get to, but now may not be the time. I'll wait till we get past the top because I want to talk to another nice person. Let's go talk to Al, calling from the great state of Arkansas. Al, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, Chris, you have made my day. I appreciate that. And congratulations to the 100 years for WMAL. I'm a longtime listener, but this is why I called. I have an idea that can break the deadlock in Washington. It's really simple. I learned to hit somebody where it hurts. And for politicians, that's their pocketbook. And I think that Mike Johnson should propose a bill today that the representatives and the senators in Washington do not get paid until this has been resolved. And the money that they forfeit should go to pay for those who've not been paid during the shutdown. And that would, of course, be the Capitol Police and other people in working around the Capitol. It wouldn't take long, and I think that they would end the shutdown, and or the Democrats would have to defend their position of why they're not allowing the Capitol Police to be paid.
Well, you know that the Democrats and the members of Congress more broadly, but the Democrats were driving the train. They passed a law some time ago exempting themselves when there are government shutdowns so that they would continue to get paid. You probably already know this. But when there's a government shutdown, Congress is guaranteed to get their paycheck. They're the richest people in the whole discussion, but they're the ones that are guaranteed to be paid. They're the only ones that are guaranteed to be paid during a government shutdown that I'm aware of.
Well, that's correct, but it's time to reverse that law.
Yeah.
And, the thing about the Republicans, and I'm definitely not a Democrat, but, the Republicans just do not know how to – they're bozos when it comes to the political game.
They really are.
Honestly, they would listen. If they would listen to your show, they'd be a heck of a lot sharper than what they are right now. But, I hate to say this, but, politics is – about political games, and sometimes you just got to play the game. They're not moving. They don't care who they hurt. And so, if Mike Johnson and other Republicans get together and propose that, they could pass that in the House, send it to the Senate, and really put their nose to the ground and say, what are you going to do now? And it's going to be hard to defend their position of why they wouldn't reverse that law and help out the local people. And, of course, that's when they're going to go ahead and pass the bill and get it done.
Well, you're absolutely right. You're right that the Democrats are not good at politics, and you're right that the speakers should come out and John Thune in the Senate and say, listen, we also want to pass an emergency bill today that members of Congress are not paid during a government shutdown. And you're absolutely correct. It would be smart politics, and that's why the Republicans won't do it, right?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. That's why they won't do it. But maybe they will get a little bit sharper. But I've got one other thing, and it'll be quick. It's anecdotal, but I always hear you talking about the climate and the NOAA and how they skew numbers. I have facts on that. I live on a farm, and I have ponds, and I have wells and everything else. Every single year this happens. They will say it's 36 or 37 degrees. Now look out. Okay, and my ponds are frozen. My troughs for my animals is frozen. If I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken, that freezes at 32 degrees. So somebody's numbers are off, and it's not mine. So
yeah,
I think that's happening. I think it's happening all over the country. They're really skewing the numbers. But I'm not a climate denier. But I don't like climate cheats, and that's what we've got in Washington.
Well, we're lied to so frequently, and you're right about the climate. They politicized everything. They politicized gender, the weather, schools, education. The left did all of this. Transgender, this whole gender thing, the climate thing, education. The left poisons everything that they touch. But we call them Democrats in the United States. Al, thank you very much for the call. Great call. Very nice. Did you know that the all-new third-generation Eden Pure Thunderstorm air purifier has finally arrived? And the third generation builds on the incredible success of the two previous generations, which already earned thousands of five-star reviews on Al Gore's amazing internet and instant bestseller. The new Thunderstorm uses two technologies that studies have demonstrated help to kill up to 99.9% of bacteria and viruses floating in the air that you breathe. It also removes dust and pet hair and smoke and all kinds of stuff. Gets rid of any stinky odor, too, and you don't have to buy filters to replace over and over again like some air purifiers. The Thunderstorm will help get rid of any stinky smell, guaranteed. No, it odors from litter boxes, trash cans, cigarette smoke, liberal protesters, musty basements. No match for the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. Right now, you can save $200 American on an Eden Pure Thunderstorm 3-pack for a whole home protection. Put one on each floor. Put one in your teenager's room. Give one as a gift. Make the air fresh and clean wherever you're breathing the air. All you have to do is go to EdenPureDeals.com and use the discount code CHRIS3, CHRIS and the number 3 to save $200 on 3 Thunderstorms. That's EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is CHRIS3. Yes, sir. All right, I've got more of the president coming. I've got more Israel and peace. What are the Democrats going to protest now? Now that the president has brought an end to the genocide, so-called. The Democrat Party is our own personal communist party, our own authoritarian party. Here's the headline from the New York Post. It's Christopher Columbus Day today. The Italian that discovered America when everybody was walking around barefoot on. They had no horses, no electricity, nothing good. New York City Columbus Day parade canceled due to New York state of emergency.